Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Very fine, thank you, sir. So much has changed in the world, sir, since last time we met last week, and we discussed the United Kingdom and some of the developments there. And I think we will come back to the United Kingdom, sir. But I want to start closer to Nigeria, sir, because there are some scenes that are catching global attention. The first one is the floods that we're seeing across the nation of Nigeria. And our heart obviously goes out to those who are affected by the flood. I hope you are not affected, sir, at all there.
No, so far, so good.
Excellent. But, sir, what is happening in Nigeria? I don't recollect flooding being this much of an issue. I do remember flooding in areas of Osun State or your state when we were younger, but never on the scale at which we're seeing it now in Nigeria. What's your reaction to all that's going on there now, sir?
Well, first of all, you were a young man a long time ago. You didn't have to contend with climate change at that time. With climate change now, the flooding is not even in Nigeria. The flooding now starts in the Sahel. Chad on top of us, Niger, and then Burkina Faso, Mali. So the River Niger starts, of course, as you know, from the Futajalon Hills in Senegal. And as it comes down, there are tributaries that flow into it. And because of the heavy rains, these tributaries get full and contribute their own quota of flooding into River Niger. Now, some of the countries on top of us have been wise enough to build dams. And when these dams get overflooded, they have to release the water. And the only way the water goes is into River Niger. Now, River Niger comes into Nigeria, if you recall, the curve. And so that water now starts pumping into River Niger. The Kainji Dam has to some extent put a brake on the flooding. But when the Kainji Dam itself gets to the peak of its capacity, if you don't want that dam to break, you've got to release the water. Unfortunately for Nigeria, River Benue, coming from the Cameroon, joins River Niger around Lokoja, where Kogi is, which then means that all the flooding of the Benue River joins all the flooding of River Niger and then flow downwards to the Delta. Now you may ask, then why is that area not just the only area that's flooded? The reason is there are so many tributary rivers in Nigeria that we don't seem to pay any attention to. You yourself just mentioned that when you were growing up, Osun and your states tended to get flooded. Well, that's because there is a tributary river there. There are tributary rivers in Benue State, tributary rivers in Anambra State, tributary river, and all of these then get to the flooding. Because when they try to flow into what they call the River Niger Basin, it pushes back. Cameroon has put wisely a dam on their own. Although if you monitor events as I have done, it hasn't prevented Cameroon from being flooded. In fact, Cameroon is badly flooded. However, they've released water from their own dam, and they have warned us year in, year out, that when they release the water from their dam in Cameroon, River Benue is going to get flooded. And we were supposed to build a dam on our own section of River Benue. We've never done so. Typical of Nigeria. We've never done so. So every year we lament and moan about flooding in Nigeria. But you are right. This year is the worst that I have seen. But don't forget that, is it last year or 2 years ago, Lagos was so flooded that I saw people bringing out canoes and paddling down Amadu Bello Way, Kingsway Road, and there were people who found river python snakes in their sitting room. They woke up in the morning, were coming down the staircase, and they had to stop. The ground floor was completely flooded. That was not the worst part. The worst part was now the presence of crocodiles, river pythons, and so on. And I know people simply sold their houses in Victoria Island, in Ikeja, Victoria Island, Ikoyi, and moved to Ikeja. I understand the rains haven't even started in Lagos at all, that the rains should be expected around mid-November. But already there are areas of Victoria Island and Ikoyi and Banana Island which have already shown signs of flooding taking place. So it's a combination of two things. Heavy rains due to climate change, the incompetence of the Nigerian government in not building dams where they should be built. And yet we have a Ministry of Water Resources. We have river basins that have been set up since the time, if I remember, of even General Gawan. Their jobs are to monitor these things and take appropriate measures. These have not been done. Now the government is giving, I think the Minister of Water Resources is in 90 days to produce results. 90 days, you're already on your way out. Presumably, you will give this report to the incoming administration. And knowing Nigerians, the new commission will now set up another committee to study the work of this. And by the time they get around to awarding the contract, if they ever do, the next rainy season will be with us. So that's what has really happened. But if look at the map of the world, I mean, look at the coverage by CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. Flooding is a universal and global problem. It devastated Pakistan. It devastated India. It even devastated Italy. So it is really what measures you now put in place, since it's going to be an annual affair. And what I would suggest to all governments in the world, not just to Nigeria, is declare flooding a priority problem to be tackled. Don't leave it to the ministries where reports will be floating up and floating down before they then get around to preparing quotation, which they then bring to cabinet, before you then award the contract and you send it to the Bureau of Public this. Declare it an emergency and a disaster area. Let the presidency set up a task force, and the job of the task force is, I will get a waiver for you from the National Assembly that you must award this contract within, I don't know, 6 months or 90 days, whatever the one that can be done. But as an anti-corruption measure, we know how much this kind of dam will be built in Ethiopia or Ghana or South Africa or wherever. And your own quotation must not be more than giving, kind of parameters of salary, measures and so on. It must not be, once we factored all that in, your quotation must not be more than 10% variation from what you will have in other parts of the world. So it's not that you will now come and start building dams at 3 times the price just because we have declared it a priority area.
Thank you for that, sir. Someone here says that some of the states in Nigeria, Lagos State specifically, has not been clearing the canals, and all these are contributors to this. And they're agreeing with you, sir, that this is a worldwide phenomenon. But, sir, let me go to
please. hang on, wait a minute. It's a good point that has been raised about whoever sent that and said Lagos has not been clearing the canals. We are, I'm sorry to say, because we are on a global cream, we are a difficult and we are a dirty people in this country. Those channels, draining channels have been built. I've noticed them being built, even when Fashola was there, but we dump rubbish into these channels. We think that actually that's what it's meant for. And each time it rains, you won't believe it, that's when people rush out to dump their rubbish. I say, oh yes, let the water now carry my rubbish away. Instead of, yes, may not be perfect, but the Lagos state, have awarded contracts to rubbish collectors. All you have to do is to pay for your rubbish to be collected. Nigerians don't want to pay that. They would rather dump it. And then the drainages get blocked when the heavy rains come. And then they start screaming, what's the government going to do about this? We're difficult people. A minister said, if you want to know how difficult Nigerians are, start a WhatsApp platform. And that this WhatsApp platform, its mandate is to talk about how to raise children age 0 to 10. He said, before you know it, people will be putting there how to go to church at the age of 50. They'll be putting there how to prepare your children for marriage. And they'll be putting all kinds of non-mandate things will now fill that platform. And yet you set up that platform for a particular purpose. And you want people at the beginning, and you'll be amazed. I'm not talking about non-educated people doing this. University professors, permanent secretaries, people you expect to understand what a platform is all about, they will be dumping all kinds of things on it. So we're difficult people in this country. We need a Murtala Mohammed. We need a Jerry Rawlings to deal with us in Nigeria before we will sit up. Buhari tried to do it. In his first coming as head of state here in Idiagbon, they were tough. And Nigerians started to groan about the measures those people were putting in his place. You will see Nigerians running across express roads under an overhead bridge. All they need to do is to climb the bridge and say, no, they will run over it. Some have got killed, some have. So Buhari put soldiers under that thing to flog them. When he catches them, the Nigerian media is seldom helpful. They were now crying, is this the Nigeria that I love? Why will you flog people? Why don't you just advise them? They are right under the head, under an overhead bridge, and you are saying they should be advised. So frankly, I don't know what to do about we Nigerians. I don't know.
Yes, there's a new generation rising, but I wouldn't go there today, sir. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the diplomatic conundrum that the United States and Nigeria find themselves in. And that is the news that the United States State Department announced that there was the threat of a terrorist attack in Nigeria, and even went as far as saying that non-essential staff should be evacuated out of Abuja, the capital. So what do you make of such a move by a foreign government?
Well, we are not the only one who've been warned. South Africa has also been warned. Now, let me give a bit of a historical background. You'll recall when there were, after Gaddafi was assassinated and there were militias running around in Libya, the American consulate in Benghazi was attacked. The American ambassador was killed. Several American consular officers were injured. Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State at that time, and she was roasted by Congress on the grounds that did she get this information? What did she do about the information she got? She had just sacrificed the lives of American diplomats and Americans and what have you. And even when she was running for president, this issue kept coming up. So the Americans have learned their lesson. Whenever they have this kind of intelligence information, no ambassador is going to ignore it. You do that to the peril of your own career. Second point to be made is when the Americans talk about threats in a particular country, remember the Americans have a global reach in collecting intelligence, in collecting information. What they're talking about in Nigeria or in South Africa, for that matter, might have been collected from one of their listening posts in Afghanistan, in Syria, even in Libya, anywhere of these places, they might have come across chatter about, oh, I'm traveling to Burkina Faso. What are you going to do in Burkina Faso? Oh, we are planning a big operation in Africa, Nigeria, and South Africa. That's where they may have picked up that information, not within Nigeria itself. And so they have to act on that. The issue then is, what do you expect our reaction to be? And not to put a too fine a point on it, I will expect some form of the way we should handle it is the way South Africa has handled it. South Africa did not come out abusing anybody. Their intelligence operator agency said, we've taken note of this. We are monitoring the situation. We are on top of the situation, and any action that we need to take, we will inform our people. Nobody went abusing the Americans, challenging them, calling their motives, into question. I mean, after all, the Americans did warn about the Boko Haram attack on Abuja in 2013 or 2014. In 2013, they did warn about it in our own arrogant way. It was like, we know what we are doing, and so on. The Boko Haram ended up attacking UN headquarters, attacking these day headquarters in Abuja. Bombs were exploded during our anniversary on the streets of Abuja. So we have a whole litany of historical incidents involving terrorism in Nigeria, stretching over probably 9-10 years. So I don't think we need one. We shouldn't take offense at what the Americans have done. They've done their job. Yes, some have suggested that they could have whispered it into our ears. But if you whisper into our ears, number one, what is the certainty that we will take action? Number two, how does whispering it into our ear protect the Americans who are here? And if anything then goes wrong, how does that protect the American, the diplomatic staff in the embassy and their careers? So really, it's where I feel sorry for Nigeria, because we are now at the center of global politics, in the sense that both the superpowers and those fighting the superpowers regard Nigeria as a theater of competition. Because really, these things in Nigeria blew out of all proportions after Gaddafi was assassinated in Libya, and after the Americans drove the ISS out of Syria and Iraq. They couldn't go further north into Afghanistan because the Americans were there. So they came down through the Sahel. And I mean, if you are a commander, a terrorist commander, if they give you a choice between building a cell in the Sahara Desert and going to build a cell in Nigeria, you will pick Nigeria, which is richer, has more resources, has more people that you can inflict damage upon. Now we're in the middle of our election campaigning, and our politicians have moved into adopting the strategy of mass rallies. Mass rallies, there's no way the security forces can check the pockets of everybody in that rally. So they are soft targets for bombs, for criminality, for kidnapping, for all kinds of things. And that's probably what the ISWA, which is ISIS in West Africa, and the Boko Haram, the kidnappers, and that's what they will be targeting. I mean, all I do is to read books on terrorism. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a retired soldier. I'm not a policeman. But one reads books by authorities on this, in these areas, and you know what these people can do. So what we should be focusing on is, what do we do to contain terrorism at this time? And what I have suggested, and I will repeat on this platform, is that the political leaders should be summoned, not invited. They should be summoned and told, no more mass rallies. No more mass rallies. Fortunately, Nigeria is awash with private television stations, private radio stations. Get onto these television stations and radio stations and address the people. Address the people, but not these mass rallies you are having, where you are presenting the terrorists with soft targets.
So there's a question some may ask, and I need to be careful on how I present this. But isn't that going to be giving in to the terrorists and allowing them to change our way of life? Obviously, we wouldn't want to be the ones in the mass rallies if something bad if a bomb were to go off. But where do we draw the line of changing our whole way of life because these terrorists are likely to bomb a public place?
Let me use the words of your new prime minister. There are hard decisions to be taken because these are hard times. There is no way terrorists are not going to affect your pattern of life anywhere in the world. I remember in 1962, when I first flew out of this country to the United States, nobody searched me. Nobody patted me up and down. Nobody asked me to open my bags so they can dip their gloved hands into it And there were none of those something where you go through and your glasses even set off an alarm and you have to take off your belt, take off your shoe, almost strip you naked there. And believe me, I mean, what those machines they put there, what they can see about your body, frankly, I feel sorry for people who feel about their modesty, because there's nothing hidden to the people inside that glass wall who are now watching what that. But now, because of terrorist activities, they practically strip you naked at the airport. So you've got to give us something for your freedom. Your freedom will be abridged. You've got to accept that. To come up with an argument that is like surrendering to the terrorists, of course that is true, but you've got to have a balance. Your rights have to be balanced now by the responsibility of the state to protect you, and also the responsibility to even protect society from some of your own recklessness. I mean, I've had eye drops taken out of my bag at Heathrow, because yes, it's written on it, eye drops. But how do they know it's eye drops? So when you get to where you are going, you will buy more eye drops. But this one is not going onto the plane. Even ordinary bottles of water, where people normally, when you get to that place, you drop it. Do you recall the people who killed to go and, pay tribute to the Queen? When they got to a particular point, everything in their bag, drinks, food they didn't consume, they were dropped in the thing before they were allowed to go into Westminster Hall. Yes, that's giving into terrorism, but you have to. It's just that you've got to draw a fine line. And believe me, it's difficult to know where you draw that line. Because as you are taking countermeasures, even the terrorists are also increasing their own measures. That's why, for example, the Americans have resorted, and not only the Americans, I dare say, but nation states have resorted to the use of drones. Drones kill innocent people. For the sake of one man you are targeting, because you found them in a wedding reception, 50 others are there. Sorry, collateral damage. You are going in for that man, you kill 50 innocent people. Are there United Nations inquiries? No. Do newspapers even bother to report it these days? They will report that XYZ terrorists that America has been looking for, or that Iran has been looking for, was found in and we sent a drone attack. They don't even talk about civilians who are killed anymore. I'm sorry, it's become a dangerous world. For all of us, a dangerous world.
There's a comment here from someone, sir, and I'd like to get your reaction to this. This person says we should caution ourselves against the kind of nostalgic commendation of past military administrations' disciplinary measures against indiscipline, in order not to create the impression that military government is what difficult Nigerians deserve.
I gave that as an example that I personally experienced. I'm always careful to talk about personal experience rather than theory. One of the greatest limitations on personal freedom came from a judgment by Felix Frankfurter of the United States Supreme Court, when he said, freedom of speech, you have the right to say anything. The American Constitution is absolute about that. But you don't have the right to shout fire in a crowded cinema, knowing that the consequence of that is there'll be panic in the cinema and people will rush out and people will get injured, people will get killed. Therefore, it's just common sense that you know your right to free speech stops you from shouting fire in a crowded cinema. Now, will you now say that one is now making the judiciary, blaming the judiciary for effective limitation of human rights? It's just your common sense. I used the experience that I went through in the 1980s when the military was there and how effective it was. If the person who sent in that comment can cite experiences under civilian governance of effective discipline of our behavior, all he needs to do is to cite it. I also gave you an example of how the Lagos state government built drainages that Nigerians, from the third floor will not be dumping rubbish into that. And then when the rains come and the flooding comes, they say, what is the government doing? I again cited that as an example of our lack of discipline and how the government has not been able to cope with that. Because when you take people to court, that case may be in court for 9 months to get a decision. And then when you get the decision, what is the fine? 5,000 naira. It doesn't even cover the cost of the prosecution of the case. We need to review. Well, since we seem to be talking really, I'm sorry, about, because we seem to be talking a lot about Nigeria, maybe we should move away from it. In Kenya, just how many months ago, it took 2 weeks for the tribunal dealing with presidential elections to consider the case and give judgment before the swearing in. In Nigeria, it takes us 3 years. In the middle of that, somebody's been sworn in, he's using resources of the state to defend his position, and therefore he could allow the case to drag on, that by the time the Supreme Court gives the decision, maybe he has only 1 more year in office. Now, will you say that I am denigrating the judiciary? I'm saying in other countries, they do things better than we do here. And I'm not going to sit here and defend the Nigerian way of life, of doing things, when I know it can be done better.
Yes, sir. Let me move to Burkina Faso, sir. This is one where there have been fears that Burkina Faso will follow the lead of Mali in bringing in the Russian Wagner group into Burkina Faso as well. And one of the things that the interim president has now said is, hey, we're not going to be following that route. We're not going to bring any of these groups into the country. Why is Burkina Faso so important to the United States for them to be coming in? And it was a US diplomat that was making the comments here as well. What is your take on Burkina Faso and this whole thing about their relationship with Russia?
Well, don't forget that when there was this latest coup in Burkina Faso, it was actually the people on the street who said, for 60 years, French troops have been in our country. They haven't succeeded in protecting us from the jihadists. They've just been here for their own interest. We want them out, and they even went out to burn the French embassy. That is the Russians they want, because they were aware of presence of Russian, well, quote unquote, mercenaries in Mali, in the Central African Republic. Those two governments have brought in Russian. I dislike it. To call them mercenaries is actually propagandist, because I think in this same program, I have mentioned the Gurkhas serving in the British Armed Forces. They are paid for to their government in Bhutan, and then they serve as a very effective force in the British. Nobody calls them mercenaries. So why should you call the Russians mercenaries because they come to replace the French? It's all part of the propaganda, whatever it is. Now, pressure has been brought upon this young officer, young captain, who is now the new head of state. I feel sorry for him. He's been caught now in the middle of the antagonism between Russia and the United States in Ukraine. That has nothing to do with Burkina Faso. Now he's been forced to take a decision that will remove that protective umbrella on the government in Burkina Faso. I feel sorry for him, because I'm ready to bet you that the French are going to organize a coup against him, and that may even involve killing him. I know enough about Burkina Faso because Thomas Sankara, who was the last autochthonous original leader who had the interest of Burkina Faso at heart, it was the French who organized his assassination by his deputy, Campore, Blaise Campore, against him. And so now that the only effective protection that this new regime could have had, you've been forced to give it up. If I were an insurance man, I wouldn't grant insurance paper on the life of the new president of Burkina Faso.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, sir. Let us talk about the United Kingdom, sir. Now that we've had, actually, before I go there, someone here is saying that the Burkinabe leadership is bringing back the lost African pride. Is that something you agree with, sir?
Yes, I would agree with that. But I think he's just succumbed to pressure from the Americans to allow the French to come back in to continue to do what they were doing before, which was to look after their own interests and not the interests of the Burkinabe people. You've been there for 60 years. You never empowered the forces, the military forces of Burkina Faso. You never empowered them. I watched an interview where the one of the young officers so said they had to man this coup, is that they are sent out to go and confront the jihadists. They get there, they find out that the jihadists are better equipped, better armed than them. And after their own ammunition runs out, the jihadists slaughtered them. And the French were there for 60 years. Why? Why did they not equip the Burkinabe forces? Because they didn't really want them to have real independence. Go through the decrees which this new young officer issued 2 weeks ago. He said, we will no longer deposit our central reserves in the French bank. We will no longer use this currency that is attached to French franc in Paris, and the parity is determined by French, whatever it is. We will no longer, he listed the whole gamut of things which France had imposed on them at independence. These were the things Thomas Sankara tried to do, and he got assassinated. This is one of the things Sylvanus Olympio in Togo, that's where the first coup in Africa south of the Sahara, took place. He tried to have a Togolese currency independent of the French franc. They organized the coup against him by a Yadema, who was a sergeant during the World War in France before he came to Togo to join the new Togolese army. He was the one who fired the shot that killed Sylvanus Olympio, and he ended up ruling Togo until he died. I know him. I met him several times. So this is just what is going to happen in Burkina Faso. Mark my word.
Wow. Let's go to the United Kingdom, sir, where we have, in a very short space of time, we now have a new prime minister, first British Asian prime minister. What do you expect to see from that, sir? Given it's an uncharted territory for the United Kingdom. What do you expect this new government to be like?
I wish you well. A lot of song and dance is being made about Rishi Sunak being the first person of color. If you want to expand it beyond being Indian, somebody of color, to rule Britain. He's coming at a very difficult time, extremely difficult. Winter is coming. Price of gas, cooking gas, heating gas is going to comfort those problems. Now you still have the problem of Northern Ireland, which raised its head today. No British government has ever succeeded in resolving the differences between the nationalist forces in Northern Ireland and the Catholics. And this has implications for Brexit. No British government has been able to resolve that. Even Boris Johnson, who lied about it, soon confronted it. You have the problem of fisheries between Britain and France, which had come out again as a consequence of Brexit. In other words, the issue of Brexit is back on the plate. It never went away. It's back on the plate. And the Conservative Party is basically Brexit people in favor of leaving, but without providing a solution for the problems that Britain will face. He is going to confront that. My fear is he will do his best. Elections must be held in 2 years' time, and he will lose that election. The Conservatives will lose that election. Labour Party will come in, and I'm afraid there will be racial overtones, as if it were Cross or Boris Johnson who was still there, the Conservatives would not have lost the election. In other words, we lost this election because we had a man of color. You read the Daily Mail and the is it Punch? No, Mirror. At that time, you will really find out the racist underbelly of the United Kingdom. So I feel sorry for him. He's going to carry the can, and all people of color. You see, first of all, we entrusted our economy to Kwesi. He crashed it. Now we entrusted the party and the country to Rishi. He crashed it. And so I feel sorry for him. But I wish him the best of luck.
So there is one point I want to raise. When President Obama became president of the United States, there was rejoicing in the Black community that, hey, we've got a Black president. Things are going to change for us now, and I'm not sure that President Obama did much to advance the Black race, and whether or not he should have is a different conversation altogether. But in the case of Rishi Sunak, are people going to be disappointed? And how difficult is it to be in such a leadership position and have to face the challenge of race, and maybe even disappointing his own constituents? And should that even be a concern in government, that I'm from the Asian community, I've got to do something to advance the cause of the Asian community? Should that even be a concern in government?
I'm afraid I think you've answered your concerns, and you've provided the explanation about it. It's one of the psychological explanations that theoreticians of governance will easily explain to you. Obama was once asked, why were you always just so cool, even when you were being attacked by essentially white people, white opponents, congressmen? Why were you always so cool, always smiling? And he said, because they are expecting him to manifest the image of the angry Black man. And I wasn't going to give them that joy of seeing me as a caricature of the angry Black man who was going to knock off your head when you provoke him. Mm-hmm. There is no way that what the expectations of the Black community materially could have been met. The granting him of a Nobel Peace Prize was to say psychologically that a Black man would become the most powerful man in the world was sufficient. They didn't expect him to empty the central bank to rebuild Black communities. I must say he overdid it in leaning towards satisfying white interests. Because don't forget, he took over at the time of the crash of the dollar and the massive depression. He made funds available to the car industry. Instead of sending to jail all those people in Wall Street, the fund hedge managers who were selling toxic insurance papers to people that they know could not pay because of the way it was. He never sent them to prison. Instead, insurance companies were bailed out, and the people who lost their houses, mostly Black people, due to this toxic, were left floating. and one of those two things, he could have met them halfway. Okay, you guys will not go to jail, but this money I'm making available to you, you are going to refund the seizure, or you are going to cancel the seizure of houses of people who couldn't pay this. He could have done that. He never did. He was just out to rebuild the economy because he thought that was going to be his weakest point. If the depression continued, he got paid by being elected the second time. Now, the same thing is going to happen in the United Kingdom. There is no way that Sunak is going to identify Asian interests and package policies that will address their interests alone. If those interests could dovetail into general interests of the working class and even the middle class, fine. But I don't see how you are going to raise taxes, not raise wages, and think you are addressing the interests of the working class. And this is what Labour is going to be hammering upon. You're going to borrow loans instead of taxing the windfall of oil companies. You won't touch that. Even if you touch that, it will be only a token. The loans you borrow is the working class who will pay in future through high taxes. Labour is going to drive that down its throat. And so it is not, if the people of color in Britain are expecting that they will have a prime minister who would look after their interests alone, who will identify with them, they'll be mistaken. The Conservative Party, especially as structured now, is a right-wing party, and he owes his election, not even his selection, to a basically right-wing Conservative Party.
So we've got a few minutes left. Let's talk briefly about the United States. And a recent poll by one of the media outlets has put President Biden approval ratings at 39%. Midterm elections around the corner. How do you rate President Biden at this stage, sir?
Well, there's another report that came out today about the spending pattern of the Americans, that in fact, rather than decrease, it has gone up, as if there's confidence in the economy. It's also the polls that have come out in Georgia have shown that there is a 4 percentage point between the Democrats and the Republicans in favor of the Democrats, especially because of this issue of Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court on the woman's right to her own body, or what basically they call abortion. And so while Biden may not be popular, the chances of the Democrats don't look as gloomy as they did a month ago. I think the Democrats have been energized. The city, what do you call them now? The women from the suburb have been energized because of the decision of the Supreme Court. And so they may not perform that badly in the midterm elections, irrespective of the rating of Biden himself. He's not an effective speaker on the rostrum. Age is starting to tell against him. And I think his handlers should stop allowing him to appear and talk off the script in front of the pressmen. This happened to Reagan when he was going in for the second term. He was already suffering from Alzheimer. His handlers knew it. And so they made sure that they shielded him from making impromptu remarks and so on and so forth. The handlers of Biden, they don't seem to be an experienced lot. And people have been American scholars have been very, very critical, not of the domestic policy, but of the foreign policy. And unfortunately, the war in Ukraine is going to play a prominent role in this election, because November is peak winter time in the United States. What's going to be the continuing effect on the gas pump and on heating oil and what have you? I think the Democrats are saddled by, I must say, a president who doesn't have a good profile. Let me just put it that way.
One last question I'll put to you, sir. How concerned are you that Russia is also testing their response to a nuclear attack from potentially NATO or enemies of Russia, as he put it? How concerned are you about that, sir?
We should be concerned. Any sensible person should be concerned. There are dangers in the game that is being played now. Russia says it's testing, taking measures to protect itself. The West said it is Russia, that it is Putin, actually, who has started playing the nuclear, playing with the nuclear button for the past 3 months and has been threatening. Now he talks about Ukraine, that Ukraine has the capacity for dirty bomb, which he's going to protect himself against. People are talking about this nuclear Armageddon as if, you are playing football. Have defensive tactics, have offense. There are no defensive tactics against nuclear weaponry. Even in the days of the Soviet Union and the United States, what kept us from going to nuclear war was because they knew there was no protection against it. Each one wanted to have what we were called a second strike capability. In other words, after the Soviets have hit the United States, we will have enough weapons left for us to inflict unacceptable damages on the Soviet Union. Or if it's the United States that launched the first strike, the Soviet Union will have sufficient weapons to inflict unacceptable damages on the United States. And that's what kept that peace between the two of them. Now we are starting to talk now about nuclear weapons as if you are talking about who is going to score the first goal. How do I prepare my defense level to make sure they don't score that goal? I mean, it's even His Holiness the Pope is starting to use the term Armageddon to describe what is happening and warning against the danger of mistakes. I don't think the Pope or any of us believes that there's going to be any person, any leader mad enough to launch a nuclear weapon, but that it could come about by mistake. And that is the worrisome part of it.
Mm. Thank you very much, sir. I know I took you about 4 minutes over. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to our viewers.
Thank you.
And to those on YouTube as well. Thank you. And good night, sir. We'll be back same time next week.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time. Good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you. By the way, I understand that there is a song that is coming up, about Wakanda. You recall that film?
We'll find it, sir. We'll find it, sir.
There's a new song coming out. I think we should play it on our platform so we don't ever.
I will look for it.
Thank you.
I will look for it, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.